And guys, in this next news story, Britain's most prolific, who is serving a 40-year prison sentence for 159 sex attacks, is facing deportation to Indonesia. Reynhard Sinaga was locked up for drugging and assaulting 48 men in crimes spanning more than a decade. It's believed he could now leave Wakefield prison for jail time in Indonesia after the country's government offered British officials a prisoner swap. So this postgraduate student handed life sentences, serving a minimum of 40 years for 136 words beginning with R's and 20 other offences back in 2020. Go through it in a moment, but during a trial at Manchester Crown Court, the court heard he would lure men back to his flat in Manchester, posing as a good Samaritan to men leaving clubs and bars before he did some nasty things to them. Police discovered more than 3 terabytes worth of footage Sinaga filmed on his iPhone of his attacks. The wealthy parents of Sinaga are reportedly behind efforts to bring their son back home. An Indonesian government spokesperson said yesterday, "We have asked his parents if they would agree, and they cried saying that they want their child to come back home. They miss him dearly." Indonesia's Senior Minister for Law and Human Rights Affairs, Minister Iza Mandera, said, "No matter how wrong a citizen is, the country has the obligation to defend its citizen." So Sinaga was allegedly attacked back in July by a fellow inmate and only narrowly avoided serious injuries. Indonesia plans to lock him up in a maximum security prison, fearing he would otherwise cause new problems. So the UK does not currently have a prisoner transfer deal with Indonesia. Negotiations would be needed to send Sinaga back. Sinaga actually came to the UK in 2005 as a student and went on to target young men who were aged 18 to 36, and he was described as a psychopath, one of the most feared men in England. His crimes were uncovered after an 18-year-old student woke up during an assault and battered him to a pulp. He beat him up, and the guy that he was trying it on was a rugby player, and you just know what damage he done to him. That's when detectives discovered Sinaga's videos, and he was arrested. So I'll go through the story now.
So Sinaga was born in 1983 in Indonesia on the island of Sumatra, and he grew up in Depok. He did a degree in engineering at the University of Indonesia, and he moved to the UK in 2007 to go and study his Masters in Manchester University, where he completed his Masters of Science degree in Planning and Master of Arts in Sociology. Whilst he was in England, Sinaga attended St. Chrysostom's Church, a liberal congregation of the Church of England, and the church provided Sinaga with a character reference for his trial. The actual presiding judge, Suzanne Goddard, remarked during the sentencing of the second trial that it is almost beyond belief that someone who could profess some Christian faith could at the same time have been committing such wicked and evil crimes. And the church later distanced themselves from Sinaga after his conviction. So Sinaga lived in Manchester, and he used to go out in the early hours of the morning looking for drunk young men who were alone around nightclubs near his flat. He was a slightly built guy, and he posed as a good Samaritan, offering men a place to sleep or even more drink. Sinaga is then thought to have laced alcoholic drinks with the drugs such as GHB, known as liquid ecstasy, to incapacitate his victims. Sinaga would then assault the victims whilst they were unconscious and video the attacks on his mobile phone. At the time of his sentencing, almost all of Sinaga's victims were known to have been heterosexual young men. He saw turning heterosexual men as a sport. How did this investigation begin? So this investigation began when Sinaga was found in a pool of blood on the bathroom floor of his apartment in Manchester city centre back in 2017. He had been beaten up so badly by another man who he lured back to his flat that medics feared he had a bleed on the brain. Captured on CCTV, Sinaga was stretchered from his home, slipping in and out of consciousness, and he was rushed to Manchester Royal Infirmary by ambulance. When he finally came round the following day, knowing the truth about his crimes, he asked the nurse a chilling question. What happened? He claimed to be Sinaga is in fact the most prolific British history.
Hello all. Earlier today, a judge who was presiding over lifted the reporting restrictions which had been imposed on the case in order to protect the integrity of a trial. The case concerned a man called Reynhard Sinaga, an international student who was living in Manchester, where he committed a significant number. that he targeted after spotting them walking alone. Conviction comes as a result of what is believed to be the largest in UK criminal history. The investigation has been carried out by a team of dedicated detectives from Greater Manchester Police, whose priority from the start has been to bring Sinaga to justice. They have worked closely alongside St Mary's Referral Centre, Survivors Manchester, Victim Services and the National Probation Victim Contact Scheme to provide comprehensive support packages to each of his victims. Without the incredible bravery demonstrated by each victim, it would not have been possible to piece together such a complex investigation, and I would like to take this opportunity to commend each and every one of them for their support. Their courage has been instrumental in bringing to justice the man who we believe to be the UK's most prolific. I appreciate that the resulting media coverage may shock people and cause concern, but I want to stress that Sinaga was operating alone and as such has posed no further threat whilst the judicial process has been underway, as he was remanded in custody shortly after his offences came to light in June 2017. Not much was known about Sinaga prior to these offences coming to light. He was unknown to police and his offences had not previously been reported to the authorities. To the rest of the world, he came across as a normal, academic man who was working towards a PhD and had a small circle of law-abiding friends that he would socialise with. As we now know, that is not the case, and he is actually a depraved individual who was prolific in his offending and a master of concealing his true nature. However, I want to be clear that he is not reflective of, nor does he represent, any of the multiple communities that we have in Greater Manchester. We are lucky to have a wealth of diverse communities across Greater Manchester, which I am sure will unite in standing together to condemn Sinaga's offending.
Sinaga was described by one detective as a narcissist and a psychopath, and by the judge who jailed him as a highly dangerous, cunning and deceitful individual who will never be safe to be released. So he was only found out because of actions from a brave teenager who is believed to be a rugby player who woke up one dreadful morning face down with the man lying on top of him. Before him, the teenager had been lured back to Sinaga's flat on false pretenses, with Sinaga posing as a good Samaritan who was helping him relocate his friends. But unlike the others, he woke up in the middle of the attack, managed to fight back and threw Sinaga to the ground, leaving him badly injured on the bathroom floor. In the confusion, he grabbed Sinaga's iPhone and fled. He then dialed 999 and called the police and said, "Hello, I've just been on a night out and then some guys took me to his house that I don't want to take me to, wouldn't let me leave his house, and he ended up, I tried to push him away. I've got blood on me because I tried to hit him to get away from me. He's trapped me in his house for most of the night. I know it's violent, but I've had to hit him a few times just to stop him from attacking me, being on top of me. I've got blood on my hands if you want to see. I think he might be busted, so if you have to, you might have to phone an ambulance because I've had to hit him a few times to get him away from me." So just before 6 a.m, the police arrived and found Sinaga badly injured in his flat and arrested the teenager on suspicion of causing GBH. As he was handcuffed, he handed over a white iPhone 4, which was Sinaga's phone. When he was finally fit to speak to officers the following day, Sinaga asked in his voice for his mobile phone. Officers retrieved a black iPhone 6 from under his bed at his flat, a device which they were yet to discover contained videos and images which would lead to Sinaga's jailing. He repeatedly gave the detectives the wrong PIN. However, when he finally gave the correct PIN number to the phone, they opened it up and there were shocking videos on there. On June the 3rd, Sinaga was initially arrested on suspicion of a single count. He was kept handcuffed to his hospital bed and under police guard. He was discharged and interviewed by detectives 2 days later. In the hours between, police scoured his flat and found dozens of photos, driving licenses, student ID cards, wallets, watches, his ID documents, along with photos and videos he took while they were out cold, and screen grabs of their Facebook profile images were trophies to him. As the sheer magnitude of Sinaga's offending came to light, detectives had to identify the men in the videos, find them and explain that he believed that they had been targeted. So Sinaga is serving a 40-year prison sentence. He must spend at least 4 decades behind bars before he can be considered for parole, but Judge Suzanne Goddard, who presided over his 4 Crown Court trials, believes he will never be safe to be released. In total, 155 men contacted Greater Manchester Police when details of his crimes became public knowledge back in January 2020. Of those, 23 have been identified as victims by detectives. All have decided not to pursue prosecution as they are satisfied with the convictions and sentence already secured. Greater Manchester Police say the total number of victims targeted by Sinaga is now 206 based on digital, physical and corroborative evidence. But 60 are yet to be identified, and police are urging anyone who thinks they may have been affected by his crimes to come forward for the appropriate help.